Welcome to Everyday English with Annie. Usually when you are trying to diagnose a problem, there's this expectation of mechanical precision.
Right, like a literal X-ray.
Exactly. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows this clear, jagged white line. The doctor points at the screen and says, there is the fracture.
Yeah, it's visible, it's categorized, and it's obvious.
And honestly, it's comforting, right? Because you know exactly how to fix it. But when you step into the world of human psychology, well-being, and our modern relationship with money, that x-ray machine is just fundamentally broken.
Oh, it shatters completely. I mean, if we try to measure modern human happiness using objective external metrics, the results we get are just completely contradictory to the reality of how people actually feel.
Which brings us to the core mission of this custom-tailored deep dive. Today, we are taking a stack of excerpts from Mark Manson's book, Everything is Fucked, to really dissect this fascinating paradox for you.
It is a great one for practicing active listening, too, because we're getting into some pretty deep behavioral concepts.
Totally. We are looking for the underlying mechanisms of why having more doesn't necessarily translate into feeling better. We want to give you a clearer lens to view your own financial aspirations, your daily habits, and, well, the silent ways your decisions are being influenced.
Right, and without drowning you in academic jargon.
Exactly. And to do that, we have to start by looking at the bizarre reality of the era you and I are currently living in.
Yeah, because historically speaking, we are living in a statistical utopia. I mean, extreme global poverty is at an absolute all-time low.
Which is amazing to think about.
It is. Diseases that used to routinely wipe out entire continents are completely curable now, or just eradicated entirely. You are carrying a supercomputer in your pocket that gives you access to the entirety of human knowledge.
Objectively, life has literally never been safer or wealthier.
Right. But subjectively, the internal landscape is just a mess. The sources point out that rates of anxiety, depression, and this profound social isolation are absolutely skyrocketing.
Yeah, specifically in the developed world, which is so weird.
What's fascinating here is the direct, inverse correlation between external safety and internal distress. This is what the sources refer to as the paradox of progress.
The paradox of progress, okay.
Yeah. The data reveals this really startling trend where the wealthier and safer a country becomes, the higher its suicide rates tend to be.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it completely defies the basic assumption that securing physical comfort and financial stability just automatically secures psychological peace.
I have to push back on that, or at least admit some confusion here.
Yeah.
Because logically, that makes zero sense.
I know, it sounds backwards.
Right. If you take away the threat of starvation, war, and plague, shouldn't our stress levels just plummet? Why on earth would prosperity make us more anxious?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at a psychological phenomenon called the blue dot effect, or prevalence-induced concept change, if you want the technical term.
The blue dot effect. Okay, what is that?
So, researchers conducted these visual experiments where they showed participants a series of dots on a screen. Most of the dots were blue, but a few of them were purple.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. The participants were asked to simply flag the blue dots. But over time, the researchers started subtly reducing the number of blue dots until almost all the dots on the screen were actually purple.
And their brains just recalibrated, right? They started pointing at purple dots and calling them blue?
Precisely. Because their minds were actively looking for a target, they subconsciously expanded their definition of the color blue just to ensure they kept finding targets.
Oh, wow. That is wild.
Yeah, and this same mechanism applies to human stress and threat detection. As the massive life-threatening problems in a society disappear, the human mind doesn't just relax.
It finds new problems.
Exactly. It simply amplifies smaller problems to fit the degree of stress it inherently expects to experience.
Okay, let's unpack this. If pain is essentially a universal constant, is our brain basically like a home thermostat that is permanently set to slightly dissatisfied, completely regardless of the financial weather outside?
The thermostat analogy is incredibly accurate, especially when you look at how our baseline emotional state operates.
Right, because if you don't have a famine to worry about,
That internal thermostat just recalibrates. It ensures that a passive-aggressive email, a delayed flight, or like a buffering Wi-Fi connection feels like a legitimate physiological threat.
it treats a bad internet connection like a tiger in the bushes.
Exactly. And this brings us to a landmark study from the 1980s that the sources highlight, which actually measured this exact phenomenon in real time.
Oh, the pager study. This one is so interesting.
It really is.
So before smartphones, psychologists gave a group of participants these clunky old pagers, and at random intervals throughout the day and night, the pagers would beep, and the person had to immediately pull out a notebook and rate their happiness on a scale from 1 to 10.
Right, and they had to write down exactly what they were doing at that exact moment.
Yeah. Why did they use pagers, though?
Well, before this, researchers had to rely on people's memories of how they felt, which, is notoriously flawed. We remember things way better or worse than they actually were.
That makes sense.
So the pager study captured raw, real-time data, and the results were overwhelmingly mundane. Whether a participant was doing something incredibly boring, like standing in line at the grocery store or experiencing a major life victory, their emotional state consistently gravitated back to a baseline of about a 7 out of 10.
A 7 out of 10. So you might hit a 9 or a 10 when you buy a brand new house, or you finally get that massive promotion you've been working for.
Oh, absolutely. You get a spike.
But that spike is biologically designed to be temporary, right? Within a few weeks or months, the thrill fades, the new house just becomes the place where you store your laundry, and you slide right back down to a 7.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a harsh, but honestly kind of liberating truth. Pain and dissatisfaction are universal constants.
We can't escape them.
No, we cannot escape them through material progress. We can only upgrade our pain.
Upgrade our pain. I like that phrasing.
Right. Like you can upgrade the pain of starvation for the pain of agonizing over which organic vegetable to roast for dinner. But the mind's perception of dissatisfaction remains stubbornly constant.
Man, if external circumstances like getting a promotion or winning the lottery can't permanently budge that baseline 7, it completely upends how we think about our financial goals.
It changes everything.
It really does. It means our internal biology is actually running the show. But how exactly does our brain drive this endless pursuit of happiness? Because for centuries, society has operated under a very specific assumption about how human beings make decisions.
Yes, the sources call this the classic assumption. You can trace it way back to philosophers like Socrates and Descartes.
The idea that we are these deeply rational creatures.
Exactly. It is the deeply ingrained belief that our rationality, our intellect, is meant to control our emotions. The assumption is that reason sits on a throne in your mind, and your passions and feelings are just unruly peasants that need to be disciplined.
Which means that if you lack financial discipline, or if you constantly buy things you don't need, the classic assumption tells you that you are experiencing a moral failing, basically. Right. It tells you that you just aren't using your logical brain hard enough to suppress your desires.
But the sources dismantle this assumption entirely by looking at a revolutionary medical case in neuroscience. The case of a man named Elliot.
Elliot's story is so tragic, but so revealing.
It really is. Elliot was the picture of success, right? He was a highly effective corporate executive, a pillar of his community, a really responsible father.
He had it all together, but then he developed these severe headaches. And it turned out to be a tumor the size of a small baseball on his frontal lobe.
Oh, man. So the surgeons go in, they successfully remove the tumor, and Elliot survives.
He survives and he goes home. And on paper, he is completely fine. His intellect is perfectly intact. His memory is flawless.
So no brain damage in terms of his IQ.
None. He could still ace any cognitive or IQ tests they put in front of him, but his actual life completely disintegrates.
It just falls apart. It falls apart in ways that utterly baffled his doctors. I mean, he lost his job because he could no longer prioritize basic tasks.
What do you mean, like he forgot how to do them?
No, not at all. He would sit at his desk and spend 3 hours debating whether to use a blue pen or a black pen to write a memo. He'd be completely missing vital meetings in the process because he was stuck on the pens.
Wow.
Yeah. He eventually lost his marriage, he got conned out of his entire life savings by a fraudster, and he ended up living in a spare bedroom.
And the initial assumption from outside observers was just that the surgery made him lazy or deliberately difficult.
Right, they thought it was a behavioral issue.
But a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio started running different kinds of tests on him. He showed Elliot images that were designed to elicit strong reactions.
Really extreme stuff.
Yeah, grotesque medical anomalies, horrific accidents, things that would make anyone recoil in disgust or sadness.
And they monitored Elliot's skin conductance and his biological responses while he looked at these photos.
And what happened?
The result was a flat line. Elliot felt absolutely nothing. The surgery to remove the tumor had severed the connection in his ventromedial prefrontal cortex.
So it hadn't damaged his logic at all?
Not one bit. It had completely eliminated his ability to feel emotion.
But Wait, if his logic was perfectly intact, why couldn't he just logically deduce the best course of action? Like, why couldn't he just look at the blue pen and the black pen, see they both contain ink, and logically just pick one?
Because logic can only calculate variables. It cannot assign value to them.
Ah.
Yeah, without emotion, Eliot couldn't make basic value judgments. To his purely rational brain, the pros and cons of using a blue pen were infinitely equal to the pros and cons of a black pen.
There was no feeling to break the tie.
Exactly. There was no internal feeling to place weight on one choice over the other. To him, losing $1 million felt exactly the same as buying a new pair of socks.
Because if you can't feel, you can't care. And if you can't care, you simply can't choose. It completely destroys the classic assumption, doesn't it?
It blows it out of the water.
If reason is supposed to be the master, a man stripped of emotion should be an ultra-productive, logical machine. But instead, he was paralyzed.
And this raises a really important question about human behavior. If logic isn't driving our actions, what is?
Right.
The sources visualize this using this great concept called the consciousness car. We all possess a thinking brain and a feeling brain. For centuries, we have flattered ourselves by believing the thinking brain, our logic, has its hands firmly on the steering wheel.
But Eliot's case proves that the feeling brain, our quick, impulsive, emotional center, is the actual driver of the car.
The thinking brain is just the navigator sitting in the passenger seat.
It's just holding the map.
Basically, it can draw maps, it can calculate the fastest route, and it can politely suggest directions to the driver. But if the feeling brain suddenly decides it wants to drive off a cliff or, buy a sports car it can't afford, the thinking brain physically cannot touch the steering wheel to stop it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If the feeling brain is essentially a stubborn, impulsive driver who just refuses to ask for directions, how do you and I ever achieve financial discipline?
It's a great question.
Right. How do we resist marketing? Do we have to somehow trick our own driver into doing what's best for us?
You don't trick the driver, you have to negotiate with it.
Yeah.
And you have to bargain in the only language the driver actually understands, which is emotion.
So no spreadsheets.
Exactly. You cannot simply throw a spreadsheet at your feeling brain and expect it to stop wanting that shiny new purchase. Logic doesn't move the wheel.
So trying to suppress your feelings with pure logic is basically like trying to wrestle the steering wheel away from the driver while the car is doing 80 miles an hour on the highway. You are just going to cause a major crash.
Yeah, you will burn out or rebel. The thinking brain has to coax the feeling brain by appealing to a better feeling.
A better feeling.
Right. You have to vividly imagine how secure and relieved you will feel when you have 6 months of emergency savings, or how deeply proud you'll feel when you achieve a long-term goal. It is all about emotional regulation, not emotional suppression.
Knowing that our feeling brain is stubbornly behind the wheel, we can now look at how the modern consumer world is explicitly engineered to bypass our rational navigator and hijack that exact driver.
Oh, they know exactly what they're doing.
This is what the sources refer to as the feelings economy, right?
Yes, the feelings economy. And to truly grasp the architecture of it, we have to look back to the 1920s and a brilliant, albeit pretty controversial figure named Edward Bernays.
The nephew of Sigmund Freud.
Yes. Bernays took his uncle's theories about the unconscious, irrational, deeply emotional nature of the human mind, and he basically weaponized them for public relations and marketing.
How did marketing work before him?
Well, prior to Bernays, advertising appealed almost entirely to the thinking brain. If a company sold a pair of boots, the advertisement would list the logical features. The leather is thick, the stitching is durable, they will keep your feet dry.
Just the facts. But Bernays realized that if you want to sell products on a massive scale, you don't talk to the navigator. You talk directly to the driver's insecurities.
Exactly. He realized you could link a mass-produced product to an unconscious emotional desire.
So you don't sell the boots based on durability.
No, you make the consumer feel that buying these boots will make them more powerful, more respected, or more attractive.
He essentially invented modern consumerism by hacking the feeling brain. And the sources map out the consequences of this by categorizing the two fundamental ways to create economic value in a marketplace.
Right. Innovations and diversions.
Let's start with innovations. Those are the things that actually upgrade our pain, right? The polio vaccine, indoor plumbing, the electrical grid.
Yeah. They take a massive, life-threatening struggle and replace it with a manageable baseline 7 dissatisfaction.
Okay, so then what are diversions?
Diversions do not upgrade pain. They simply numb it. Endless scrolling on social media, binge-watching content, Mindless retail therapy, consuming junk food.
So they just distract the driver.
Exactly. They offer a temporary spike to an 8 or a 9, followed by the inevitable crash. What happens is that once a society reaches a certain threshold of wealth and security, once the major innovations have largely eradicated extreme physical suffering, the economy pivots almost entirely to diversions.
Because the market realizes there is infinite profit in helping people temporarily numb their baseline 7.
It's a goldmine.
But the sources provide a really stark warning here. Numbing your pain doesn't cure it. In fact, relying on diversions actually makes us psychologically fragile.
And this connects directly to the biological concept of antifragility. If you think about human muscles, they are antifragile.
Meaning they need stress, right?
Yes. If you subject them to the stress of lifting weights, they experience micro tears, and they repair themselves to become stronger than they were before. They literally require stress to grow.
And the human mind operates on the exact same principle.
Exactly. It is meant to grow through overcoming challenges, facing discomfort, and navigating pain.
But when we surround ourselves with a constant buffer of diversions and consumer comforts, we deny our minds that necessary stress. If you never face any emotional or psychological discomfort, you completely lose your tolerance for it.
You become weak.
Yeah, the thermostat becomes so sensitive that a slightly delayed text message sends you into an emotional spiral.
And this fragility is heavily fed by what the sources define as fake freedom. We are conditioned to believe that freedom is synonymous with infinite consumer variety.
We're like having 20 different brands of cereal to choose from, or 50 different colors for your smartphone case.
But variety in a vacuum isn't freedom. If you are paralyzed by the paradox of choice, crippled by anxiety, and constantly comparing your life to a curated feed on a screen, you are profoundly unfree, no matter how many brands of toothpaste you can choose from.
So what is real freedom then?
Real freedom, according to the sources, is the exact opposite of infinite choice. Real freedom is the conscious choice of what you're willing to sacrifice. It is the power of self-limitation.
So what does this all mean? Is fake freedom essentially like pulling up a streaming menu with 10,000 shows where you spend an hour endlessly scrolling, completely unable to pick something, and you just end up stressed out and exhausted?
Yes, exactly that.
Whereas real freedom is intentionally committing to read just one book, turning off your phone, and actually experiencing the deep joy of focusing on it.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The danger of that 10,000 show streaming menu, the fake freedom, is that it demands the world constantly conform to your endless shifting desires.
Which is exhausting.
It is an impossible standard, which leaves your feeling brain perpetually dissatisfied. Real freedom demands nothing of the external world. It is the mastery of your own internal will.
So, by limiting options, you gain control.
Yes. When you consciously choose to limit your options, when you dedicate yourself to one craft, commit to one partner, or stick to a strict financial plan, you eliminate the agonizing noise of infinite alternatives. You actually expand your capacity to find deep meaning.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of this deep dive. We've established that external material wealth naturally breeds an explosion of diversions. We know that relying on those diversions makes us psychologically fragile, and that chasing a completely pain-free life is just a trap set by the feelings economy.
A very expensive trap.
So how do we actually find value and resilience in a world where money literally cannot fix that baseline 7?
The sources argue that true psychological resilience, true adulthood, requires stepping entirely out of the transactional mindset. We have to stop treating the world and ourselves merely as a means to an end.
A means to an end. This concept is heavily rooted in the philosopher Immanuel Kant's formula of humanity, right?
Yes, it is.
Treating humanity as an end, not a means. How exactly does that philosophical idea protect us from the manipulations of the feelings economy?
It fundamentally changes your motivation. When you treat things as a means, you are operating purely on a transactional level. If you only exercise to look good for validation on social media, you are treating your body as a means to an end.
Okay, I see.
If you only act kindly towards someone so they will do a favor for you later, you are treating them as a means. The feelings economy thrives on this. It constantly tells you to use products, people, and even your own time as a means to achieve a temporary spike in pleasure.
But adulthood, according to Kant, is doing the right thing simply because it is the right thing. It is embracing honesty, integrity, and courage for their own intrinsic value.
Yes. When you hold yourself to intrinsic principles, you become anti-fragile. Marketers cannot easily manipulate your unconscious insecurities if your self-worth isn't tied to external validation.
That is so powerful.
Living a good life doesn't mean avoiding all suffering. It means actively choosing the right pain. The pain of discipline, the pain of self-reflection, the pain of genuine commitment.
Money can absolutely upgrade your problems. It can take away the pain of not making rent, which is huge. But it cannot bypass the human condition, and it cannot eliminate the necessity of choosing your own values. You have to choose your pain, or the world will gladly choose it for you.
And that leads to a really crucial realization about how we structure our lives.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought for you to take away today. The sources mention that every single one of us operates under what they call a God value.
A God value.
Yeah. This is your ultimate top priority, the fundamental lens through which you judge every other aspect of your life. For some people, it's accumulating wealth. For others, it's status or protecting their comfort.
And this isn't just an abstract concept, it is measurable.
Exactly. So here's the challenge for you. Look closely at your own daily habits, your screen time, and your bank statements over the last 30 days. Where is your time actually going? Where is your money flowing?
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It is. When you strip away what you say your priorities are, what does your personal God value actually appear to be on paper? And the truly uncomfortable question you have to ask yourself is this. Is that a value you consciously, intentionally chose for yourself?
Or is it a value that the feelings economy quietly chose for you while your navigator was asleep at the wheel?
Remember that internal thermostat we talked about? It is always going to reset to slightly dissatisfied. The goal isn't to buy enough diversions to break the machine. The goal is to realize you are the one who gets to decide what you're willing to sweat for. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.